What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes.
I've come from another world to do battle with you.
When I started making videos, I think that everybody around me expected me to make a video on Metal Gear Solid before anything else. It's no secret that Metal Gear Solid is my favorite series, but for exactly that reason I find it difficult to put how much I love it into words, and I find criticizing it to be equally as frustrating. Metal Gear Solid 1 was a groundbreaking title that solidified Hideo Kojima as a designer, cinematic video games as a marketable concept, and single-handedly popularized the stealth genre of video games.
When hunger strikes, it's up to you to strike back. Hide. Creep. Sneak.
It's a classic that will go down as one of the most important video games in history. So it's no wonder in my mind why Metal Gear Solid is such a hard thing to tackle from a critical standpoint. Thankfully, if you want to play Metal Gear Solid for yourself, it's quite easy to get your hands on. For $50, you can get a copy of the PS1 discs on eBay, assuming you have a classic PlayStation. Or if you have a PS3 on hand, you can grab the Metal Gear Solid collection for about $100. But actually owning a PlayStation 3 seems to be more and more rare as time goes on. Thankfully, a digital copy is available for PC on Good Old Games. You can purchase Metal Gear Solid 1 on GOG.com for only $10. This might be some of the best attention I've ever seen a game getting in regards to it being accessible. Not all the games in the Metal Gear series have this luxury.
You're strange.
In Metal Gear Solid 1, you follow the escapades of the world-famous Solid Snake, a soldier from a legendary counterterrorism unit called Foxhound. Said counterterrorism unit has recently gone rogue and taken over the nuclear storage facility located on the Shadow Moses archipelago of Alaska. They demand $1 billion in the remains of the renowned Foxhound founder known only as Big Boss.
There are 6 members of Foxhound involved in this terrorist activity. Psycho Mattis, with his powerful psychic abilities. Sniper Wolf, the beautiful and deadly sharpshooter. Decoy Octopus, master of disguise. Vulcan Raven, giant and shaman. And Revolver Ocelot, specialist in interrogation and a formidable gunfighter.
Looks like a lovely bunch of folks. Too bad we'll be meeting under these circumstances.
Unless these demands are met, they will begin launching nuclear missiles all over the globe using a new prototype weapon called a Metal Gear. Your mission is to infiltrate Shadow Moses, save the DARPA chief Donald Anderson, and the Armstech president Kenneth Baker. A mission that quickly becomes convoluted.
A raven on my head. It thirsts for his blood.
Colonel, that ninja is Gray Fox.
She kind of wiggles her behind.
You were really looking.
Well, she's got a very cute behind.
So, what's the catch? How does Metal Gear separate itself from the vast expanse of military action games? One of the most important qualities about Metal Gear Solid is the lack of starting equipment. Upon arrival to Shadow Moses, Snake only has a sneaking suit, his bandana, nanomachines in his blood to keep him from freezing in Alaska, a pack of cigarettes that he smuggled in his stomach, a pair of binoculars, and a two-way communication radio called a codec. Snake is a suitable fighter in hand-to-hand combat, but he's no Superman. At the beginning of the game, Snake will die after getting shot only about 3 times. But as you progress through the game and defeat bosses, his health bar will get larger. This makes sneaking around and not being noticed your primary goal while progressing, at least at the beginning of the game. If you intend to go at it without firearms, Snake is capable of grabbing an enemy from behind and breaking their neck. From the front, the best he can do is knock them around a bit until they're unconscious, a status condition that only lasts for about half a minute. For the time, the AI of the enemies is quite impressive. They react to the sound of footsteps in puddles of water, track boot prints through snow, and call for backup. To avoid them, the game gives you access to a radar minimap in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This miniature recreation of your environment uses wireframe lines to represent walls and small dots to represent guards and animals. But its most important function is showing the small gradient cone that represents an enemy's line of sight. These cones are larger or smaller depending on the difficulty of the game, and if Snake passes through them, he'll be seen. The alarm will be raised, and the area Snake is currently in will be flooded with enemies loading him full of hot lead. During an alert phase, your radar is stripped away, and the player is tasked with hiding until the alert is lifted, which usually takes around 30 seconds or less. You can choose to fight back, of course, but this generally will be a drain on your equipment and isn't something that can be feasibly done until at least halfway through the game. So with that, your main gameplay loop is fixed. Pass through the different zones while avoiding being seen and utilize your minimap to avoid sightlines and other hazards. Though distinct in the gameplay department, Metal Gear Solid is very limited in the visual aspects of its design. Models lack polygons and are generally just flat, pixelated textures stretched across wireframe meshes that by the standards of modern gaming look archaic and visually muddy. There is no lip sync as character models lack mouths, and entire facial features are generally represented by a smudge of color across skin tone. Animations are similarly lacking, with overall little impact and basic posing of models being some of the non-action highlights. These obsolete graphics give a milquetoast representation of the desired movements and have a hard time conveying anything truly emotional. There also aren't many objects in the environment that give off the visual impression of realism, but where Metal Gear Solid visually fails, it makes up for it with some of the best audio in gaming history.
I got tired of disguising myself. The truth is, the uniform smelled like blood.
What's that mark?
Huh? Oh, this? It's a paint tattoo. It's not real. I was a fan of Foxhound way back, when guys like you and my uncle were in it. None of that gene therapy like there is today. You guys were real heroes.
There are no heroes in war. All the heroes I know are either dead or in prison, one or the other.
But Snake, you're a hero, aren't you?
I'm just a man who's good at what he does, killing. There's no winning or losing for a mercenary. The only winners in war are the people.
That's right, and you fight for the people.
I've never fought for anyone but myself. I've got no purpose in life, no ultimate goal.
Come on.
It's only when I'm cheating death on the battlefield. The only time I feel truly alive.
Seeing other people die makes you feel alive, huh? You love war and don't want it to stop? Is it the same with all great soldiers throughout history?
Why didn't you contact me?
My codec was broken.
Is that all?
Shouldn't you just be happy we met up like this? How did you recognize me in disguise?
Oh, she's got a very cute behind.
The vocal performances in Metal Gear Solid are still fantastic to this day, and I strongly believe that they paved the way for voice acting in video games. The theatrics of David Hayter, Debbie Mae West, and Christopher Randolph have been some of the most influential and inspiring in the gaming world, and that's an important thing to get right in a game that attempts to posit itself as a romantic cautionary tale of political intrigue and espionage.
Oh, you're wrong. The threat of nuclear war isn't gone. In fact, it's greater than it's ever been. The amount of spent nuclear fuel and plutonium is increasing even today. Listen, have you ever seen a warehouse full of nuclear material?
No.
Drums and drums of nuclear waste stacked this high, as far as you can see. Because there's still no real way to dispose of the stuff.
So they just close the lid and try to pretend like it'll go away?
Essentially, yes. And they're not even doing a good job of storing it. Many of the drums are corroded, with nuclear waste seeping out of them.
Unbelievable.
Characters will wax poetically about the nature of love and war, what it means to be a soldier, the inspiration of family, and the point of life without direction.
It's why I followed you up this far. Have you ever loved someone?
That's what you came to ask?
No, I mean, I was wondering if even soldiers fall in love.
What are you trying to say?
I want to ask you, do you think she's got a very cute behind?
Some of this audio is still an inspiration in internet circles worldwide, and even then, the music is just as good. Metal Gear Solid's soundtrack is a bombastic flourish of industrial sounds made to suit two things: sneaking and heroics. In calm moments, the music almost sounds like synthetic warehouse ambience. In more tense moments, jumping strings make you want to run as fast as your legs will carry you. The game's audio also has context-sensitive mixing, such as echo and reverb to account for the environment and to hide the compression of the bass recordings. Footsteps sound different depending on what surface you're walking over, and some obstacles, such as cameras, can be distinctly heard before ever being seen.
A surveillance camera?
Only some of the best-selling products of the time can even compare, so it might come as no surprise that the gameplay itself is also incredibly thought out. The player controls Snake from a top-down perspective, reminiscent of games from the 3rd and 4th generation of consoles. You can walk or run in all 4 cardinal directions, crawl along the ground, look in first person, hug your body against walls, interact with objects in the environment, and call your support team on the radio. Though by modern standards this is a far cry from the control games like The Last of Us or even later Metal Gear titles allow for, at the time this was quite an arsenal of controls for the players to wrangle with. I even knew a few people who considered it frustrating and confusing. Though Snake can carry an unlimited number of objects, he must commandeer most of them from the Shadow Moses facility and can only equip 2 objects at a time, 1 item and 1 weapon. Swapping between equipment is done by holding down a menu button to open either the item or weapon menu. From there, all of Snake's equipment will appear and the player can shift left and right through the menu to select what they wish to equip. Though it should be noted that while these menus are open, the game also pauses in the background. Under most circumstances, it is ideal for Snake to equip the ration item in the item menu, and your choice of gun in the weapons menu. This is because if Snake takes damage that would otherwise kill him while having a ration equipped, he'll automatically consume a ration and heal. This can be useful for situations like running away from enemies, or just trying to downright outlast them in a firefight through pure attrition. This mechanic does come with a downside, however, as many doors require Snake to equip a keycard from his item menu to make them open. So in situations where you're trying to run away from enemies, you'll have to swap from the ration item over to the keycard and possibly die from taking damage in the attempt to get the door opened and escape. Another impressive aspect of the control scheme is Snake's ability to knock on walls. At any time if Snake pushes against a wall and hugs up against it, he can press the punch button and knock on the wall to make a sound. This will get the attention of any nearby guards and cause them to come investigate, allowing for Snake to set up an ambush in some cases and sneak away in others. This isn't a mechanic that gets much use, not in my games at least, but it can come in handy in situations where the map is larger and allows for more open movement. Though the SOCOM pistol and the FAMAS assault rifle, Snake's primary weapons, are functionally the same in-game, specialized weapons such as the sniper rifle or either of the missile launchers will generally have their own functionality. The sniper rifle will sway in Snake's hands in a strong or weak chaotic pattern, depending on if he is standing or lying down. This can make it necessary to use an item called diazepam to steady his aim and get a clear shot quickly if you're under fire. The Nikita missile launcher is remote controlled after firing, meaning the camera will follow it until it detonates on impact. From here, you have loose control over the missile's trajectory, but when you move the missile left or right, its pace will slow, allowing you to make more distinct movements. But after a short amount of time, the missile will explode entirely on its own. Metal Gear Solid uses these distinct weapon characteristics to shake up the gameplay monotony of sneaking around in fun and enjoyable segments that are some of its most memorable moments. You'll experience a sniper duel in the cold of a snowy clearing against the world's most talented sniper. You'll fight a helicopter one-on-one with the Stinger homing missile launcher, and go toe-to-toe with a tank using only grenades. Though the game has plenty of sneaking to be done, it doesn't shy away from the combat aspects when it comes to boss fights. Most of the bosses are members of Foxhound and work as puzzles as much as tests of your mastery of the control scheme. But those aren't the only puzzles that Metal Gear Solid posits to the player. One of Metal Gear Solid's most famous design aspects is its puzzles that require the player to think outside of the box to solve. Some examples include using cigarettes to view invisible lasers, looking on the back of the CD case, or in the store page in this case, to find a radio frequency, or swapping the controller from player 1 to player 2 ports in order to keep an enemy from reading your mind. With immersive gameplay like this, it's no wonder that Metal Gear Solid became a classic that defined a genre. That doesn't mean that there are no downsides to the gameplay, though. Metal Gear Solid is an old game, and it has its share of old, bad design choices. The most egregious of these is backtracking. At multiple points in the game, Snake will have to travel back to previous buildings to procure equipment or to do mundane tasks. These are some of the game's lowest points and really speaks to how at the time this was considered acceptable for a AAA title. There's also at least one moment I can think of where you can walk directly past a necessary item, an item that, if you miss, you will die and have to redo the entire 3-minute segment. These can be some of the most frustrating moments in Metal Gear Solid, but thankfully the story stays charming enough to keep the player from giving up. While sneaking through the items, Snake slowly befriends his support team on the other end of his radio. There is Colonel Roy Campbell, Snake's old commander, who has asked him to come back for one last job. Mei Ling, the inventor of your radio and radar, as well as the designated Japanese hot chick for Snake to flirt with. Naomi Hunter, a genius scientist in the field of nanotechnology and genetics. Natasha Romanenko, a weapons specialist who everyone forgets even exists and never talks to. And finally, Master Miller, who Snake reveres as a mentor, going to him repeatedly over the course of the game for inspiration and survival expertise. There are friendly characters on Shadow Moses as well. During his mission, Snake befriends Meryl Silverberg, Colonel Campbell's niece and president of the Solid Snake fan club, who has been captured for refusing to cooperate with the terrorists. Additionally, he also meets Hal Emmerich, the designer of the titular Metal Gear system, who literally names his codename after an anime convention.
Call me Otacon.
Otacon?
It stands for Otaku Convention. An otaku's a guy like me who likes Japanimation. Japan was the first country to successfully make bipedal robots.
The plot of Metal Gear Solid could take up its own video, but the short version is that the United States government has been secretly developing a new type of railgun, attached to a giant walking tank that can launch nukes from any type of terrain. The Foxhound group decided taking over the station would give them the leverage that they needed to force the United States to deliver to them the body of Big Boss, whose remains could be used to treat the genetic maladies of their Foxhound army, a genetically altered group of genome soldiers who patrol the area as guards during the game. Without Big Boss's genetic code, they'll die or something. It's never actually really clearly stated, but it does make Foxhound sympathetic in their reasoning. Each of the members of Foxhound has their own special powers and reasons for participating in the coup, but they're all led by the infamous man who shares his codename with Snake himself, Liquid Snake. Can Snake save the girl, defeat the evil shadow of himself, and save the world? Only you can find out. Metal Gear Solid has two different endings depending on how you go about playing the game, and it gives the game a solid amount of replayability for a game made in this time period. What I personally love about it is how distinct almost every characteristic of the gameplay can feel in comparison to other games of its genre. There is nothing quite like it, and in a time where the stealth genre seems to be in a long hibernation, it's a great time to revisit this old classic. Of course, depending on how accustomed you are to the control schemes of games from this era, your mileage may vary. But for me, Metal Gear Solid is an absolute classic and one of my favorite games of all time. I'm giving Metal Gear Solid 1 for the PlayStation 1 a 9 out of 10. Great. I'm glad to finally have this video done. It seems like I've been wanting to do this for years, and it's empowering to finally get around to it. Special thanks to our executive producers Anthony Wumbo, John Foreman, and Zachary Coroner. Sign up for the Patreon if you'd like to help this channel grow and see your name in the end of these videos. I also have a podcast that comes out every week that you can see on this channel or on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. Just search Anything Cast.